co-record. All right, well, thank you so much for being here, guys, and welcome again to some coaching here. And today we're going to be Q&A on what's going on with this market, what is going on with all these forms that we are now having to look at and use, and when are we going to use them. And so today is just a Q&A. I want to make sure that you guys get your questions answered if you're unsure about something. Obviously we've recorded a lot of videos. I'm still recording some videos this week to put up there on some of the forms, but what are the key questions that you guys have? Because I want to make sure that you guys get your questions answered. If you're still unsure of anything, and no question is a dumb question, I want to make sure that you guys are clear so that when you get into, this transactions or working with these buyers and there's these sellers, that you understand. And now obviously with the MLS disappearing the compensation, you're not going to know how much you're going to get paid. So it's really important for you guys to understand how you're going to work this new system in real estate, this new episode in real estate, because we've had quite a few episodes. We went through 2008 for those that were in real estate back then. We went through COVID. That changed a lot of things when we went through COVID with real estate. And now we have these things that are coming up with NAR. And, so there's been a lot of, and I have to give it to the ones who have stuck it out in real estate, because there has been a lot of evolution in the industry, and the ones who really adapted were the ones that were able to stay in the business. So, I want you guys to be able to adapt so that you can stay in the business and don't feel overwhelmed. It's not a lot. It's confusing, but it's not a lot, right? So I want to make sure that your confusion is cleared up completely. So we can go ahead. Anybody who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question can do so. And then we'll go ahead and start answering those questions. Shanika, you're unmuted. What questions do you have regarding this whole change?
Okay. Don't whoop me. That's why I came here to make sure I understand everything that's going on. I know there's nothing really changing on the listing part of it. It's more of the buyer part is what I'm trying to figure out. I know the rental part has changes too, leasing part, because I was reading some documents you sent over from time to time.
So there are changes to the listing agreement as well, which I'm recording those classes probably today. So I will have those classes recorded, at least how to fill them out. But there are changes to the listing agreement, and we can discuss that. But what are your questions regarding the buyer side?
Okay, so just the buyer side, just to make it clear, we're not showing property until they sign those agreements.
That is correct. And there's two agreements that you can use, which is the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, which is the EBBA form. So you're going to hear EBBA quite a bit. And when you hear that, they're talking about the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. So that form is, I think, the 7TB. So write that down. It's the EBBA 7TB, because you're a transaction broker and it's version 7. So you're going to, when you're looking for that document, which they are all posted in my agent account under the files tab under your group, whether you're in Miami Lakes, Doral, or you're part of the VIP group, they're going to be posted in those rooms. So if you go in there under files, you'll be able to find all those new forms there. Okay. I believe that the listing agreements, I'm not sure if I uploaded them yet, because I wanted to make sure I give a class first on those before I upload them, but I might have. So, you guys can look there, but there is an new exclusive listing agreement as well. Okay. So yes, to answer your question, yes, you cannot show a home without either an EBBA form or a showing agreement form. There's a new showing agreement form as well. Now, what's the difference between the EBBA and the showing agreement? They both have a lot of the same verbiage as far as compensation is concerned. But let's say you're working with a buyer and you're not sure if they're serious about maybe working with you. They might be a little scared of signing the EBBA form, anything of that nature. You can always use the showing agreement. The showing agreement is only for the properties that you show them. So let's say you met them at an open house, right? And they want to see a couple more properties. They want to see that property, but they might want to go see the property across the street that might be for sale as well. Or they might want to go see, you know, 2 or 3 properties to see if they even want to work with you, right? So you can use the showing agreement. They have to sign one or the other. There has to be an agreement in place when you're working with a buyer. And let's define what working is. Working with a buyer is not necessarily sending them properties. You know, like you can send them properties on the MLS. That doesn't necessarily mean, like, let's say you get a prospect and they want you to send them some list. You're not still working with them. When you're working with them is when you have a serious conversation about pre-approvals. You're sending them to the lender. That's already working with that buyer. So okay, and you're showing them properties. That's working with that buyer. Okay. So, but they have to have one or the other. You cannot show a property without one or the other. Now, the showing agreement is for particular properties. They want to go see 3 properties before they basically commit to you. So the showing agreement, I kind of almost put it as the dating agreement, right? We're dating, let's see how it goes. And then the EBBA is now we're married. Okay, we're getting married. And so when you get married, that means there's a commitment, there's a contract in place. When you're dating, you can't, that contract still does save you for your commission if they decide to buy one of the properties that's listed on that showing agreement. Okay. So those are the 2 different forms that you can use when you're out showing properties to the consumer, because now all the verbiage on the forms says consumer, not buyer. Okay. So they either say broker or they say consumer. So, you know, the verbiage has changed as far as that's concerned. Okay. So when you see consumer, that's just talking about the buyer. Any other questions, Shanika?
I have a question
Sure. Go ahead.
after Shan. Um, what is the time? Because it is my understanding that the broker needs to sign the agreements.
As of right now, the brokers need to sign the agreement. However, it says broker or authorized, it doesn't say authorized associate. I think it says authorized associate. Before, I think it just said or sales associate. Now it says authorized associate. So that verbiage also changed. I believe that we are going to, they're writing up the policy right now, Oneida, for La Rosa Realty, as to how we're going to handle that. So there was discussion that, you know, maybe for the first 5 or 6 months, you know, that we are going to have the broker sign it just so that they know that you guys know what you're doing, right? And then once they feel comfortable that everybody knows what they're doing, then at that point they would authorize the agents, but we haven't decided that yet. So for right now, you can go ahead and sign it. We still might need the broker to sign at one point or another, if needed. So it's a little confusion. We're going to have those answers on the 13th, okay? Which is when our MLS will uh, basically no longer, as far as Miami is concerned, the MLS will no longer show compensation. If you're in Central Florida or any, you know, depending on the MLS you're in, there's a lot of MLSs already that are not showing compensation. And I believe Central Florida took place on the 6th. So they're no longer showing compensation. Ours is on the 13th. That is when they are going to remove compensation. They are going to remove compensation for all, for tenants, for commercial, so for rentals, commercials, and sales. They're eliminating anything that has to do with money on the MLS. So to answer your question is, right now you can go ahead and be the authorized. If it says authorized, you can go ahead and initial those, okay? But if it says broker, the broker needs to sign it. And I know it's going to be, you know, I think that that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, because for instance, if I get the form that is, it says broker has to sign, right? There's some spaces where it says broker has to sign, but then there's a couple places that say broker and then or authorized associate, right? To me, I mean, if I have to send this form for my broker to sign it, he might as well just sign all the spots, right? Because it doesn't make sense for, if he's already going to sign it, you know, especially when we have to share that that agreement with someone else, right? So if we have to share that agreement with someone else, it needs to be signed. It can't be left without the broker's signature. So right now, you know, it's going to be a little complicated because we might have to send that form before we even once the client signs or the consumer signs, then at that point you have to send it directly to the broker so they can sign before you can share it with another party, right? So if you're sharing it with the listing agent or you're sharing it with someone else, then obviously that form has to be signed by the broker. Especially now, there's some title companies that are going to require that EBBA before they close. So those documents need to be signed completely executed with all the signatures. And so sometimes we're going to have to send it to the broker. So, you know, to me, I'm going to go the easy route. I'm just going to send it directly to Debbie and say, hey, Debbie, you know, can you make sure that Joe signs this document, right? And let the admin team sign where they need to sign, send me back the document, and then I'll execute it, because it's doesn't make sense. Some of the forms still don't make sense to me because they're asking for the broker signature in a lot of spots, but then there might be one spot where it says broker or broker associate. But I mean, if I'm going to have to send it to my broker to sign, I might as well just have them sign the whole thing. Why would I sign it, you know? So at this point, we have not yet been authorized completely, even though I'm sure they're going to let it slide if you do it, at least until they make that final decision on the 13th. So for right now, if it says broker or authorized broker or authorized associate, I believe that we can sign until they determine, you know, what the policy is going to be. Did I answer your question, Oneida?
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
I'm really concerned about that because, you know, it's very different, the timing, how we work with the buyers.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, having sometimes the perfect timing is when we are with them. When they go to the bed and think about it, they may change their mind. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is the time frame that the broker has to sign our agreements, but
Well, as
it
long,
will
I
be
think as long, so this is how I would work it. Like if I'm going to work with a buyer, it's only an agreement between you and the buyer, right? It's not, or the broker and the buyer. So it's only between the broker and the buyer. So in that particular instance, you can just send it directly to the buyer, have them sign, right? Now you're under an agreement. Once they sign, now you can send it to, you know, but like right now, right? When we do our review, we send all our documents to review where it says that the broker has to sign. They just sign it when we send it for review, right? But right now, we're just going to have to be a step ahead. So once that EBBA is signed by the consumer, then at that point, you should probably send it to the broker so that at least that document is completely signed, because you might need that document signed and you might need to give that to the title company. So you don't want to wait until the last minute right before closing. So now you can send your document in so somebody can sign, and if they don't sign it on time, you know, so you know, because the title company might ask for that document in the middle of the transaction, right? It might be right before closing, or it might be in the middle of the transaction. We don't know because that hasn't been determined yet. So to be on the safe side, once that document is signed by your consumer, I would just, you know, submit it to Debbie, send a note under the loop, just put, hey, Debbie, can you sign this EBBA? And just have it signed and ready to go in case the title company asks for it during the transaction. So that way you're not trying to, you know, get the signatures right before.
fair enough.
Mhm.
Teresa, go ahead.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Shanita.
No, let her finish. She was about to say something. Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much. I have another question because I've heard that there are companies that are limiting the realtors to get buyers in case the seller is not paying commission. So, and I want to know if there is anything about this with La Rosa.
No, I mean, you know, it's for us, it's really business as usual, pretty much the same way we've been doing things. As far as working with buyers, yeah, I mean, we're not going to limit you not to work with buyers, and, you know, because remember that it's up to you as the agent to secure your commission, right? Your compensation. because we're not even using commission anymore. It's compensation or professional fee. So in order for you to secure your compensation, you want to make sure that you have those agreements in place. Now, what could happen, right? When you're having that conversation with the buyer, that's why those net sheets are so important, so that they understand how much they might possibly need to bring to the closing table, and that in that net sheet needs to be your compensation, right? Because if the selling side is not covering that compensation, your buyer's going to have to pay that compensation, and you want to make sure that they have enough money in the bank. Okay, so if you give them a net sheet and let's say you speak to a buyer and say, Mr. Buyer, you know, your estimated closing costs are going to be whatever, $22,000. Make sure that your fee is incorporated into that $22,000 so that they know how much money they have to have at the closing table. So those are really important for you guys to make sure that you're using and putting your compensation in there so that the customer is clear. Obviously, if you tell them $22,000, but you're able to get compensation from the listing side, they're going to be happy at the closing table because they might only need 16, right? So that's really important for us to start using, is those net sheets, so that way we can share how much our compensation is going to be based on the EBBA form that we sign with them, so that they understand that there is a possibility that they're going to have to pay that compensation. If the selling side, if we can negotiate it from the listing brokerage, we can negotiate it with the seller, but we can get maybe concessions. We might be able to get them, but if we can't get any of that, then they have to be clear that they will have to pay compensation. So yeah, no, it's business as usual. We're not going to limit you guys to on working with buyers and just say listings. No, I mean, you know, there's still a lot of buyers out there. There's still a lot of business. It's just new communication, being more clear. Okay. Sharnika?
As far as the EBB that needs to be signed by the broker, or maybe needs to be signed by us. So if I have a buyer in front of me right now, I know .Loot is a perfect place to go ahead and email it to her. You can sign it right here while we're having this conversation. Or I know you would prefer us to print it out, which would be the smartest thing to do, to have it up front. Once they sign it, that agreement is set. Even though the broker, I can go ahead and show the property, even if the broker hasn't signed it yet.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can, as long as the consumer has signed the document. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That was my question.
Okay, perfect. Good question. Janet, any questions on any of the forms before we move on to, because obviously Shanika had some questions about the listing too, so. Any questions regarding working with buyers and the EBBA form and the showing agreement?
No, it was basically, that was my concern too, about the broker signing, and then the process of if the broker doesn't sign, do we still show the listing? But you just answered that question.
Okay. So
That's
are you guys
basically-
clear? Are you guys clear on?
One more question, please. One more
Sure, of
question.
course,
And this
Oneida.
is thank you. This is something personal, but maybe touching somebody else. I have a buyer who is almost ready to close. Hopefully it's closing in this week. Do I need to provide her still the documents,
Yes,
the EBB?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, yes.
Same thing with the listing agent, with the listing side. Then
With the listing side, okay, so the listing side, I just found out because I just took another class the day before yesterday. And on the listing side, now they are saying that they just need a disclosure. If the verbiage on the contract that you're using, right? Because remember that some brokers use the standard Florida Realtors form, and some brokers have created their own as-is contract, okay? There's some brokers that have created their own as-is. So as long as the verbiage that is disclosing that compensation is going to be shared, and how much of that compensation is going to be shared, which our contracts, right, your current contracts do have that, because it says the cooperating stuff on the bottom, right? Or on the second page. So because of that, we just need to give them the disclosure. So the disclosure is on Form Simplicity, but I just downloaded it yesterday because they just released it the day before yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and post that disclosure form. That disclosure form does not need to be signed. It just needs to be sent to the client that you have a listing with, informing them of their disclosure, but they do not need to sign it. As long as send it through dot loop, so you have proof that you send it to it when you send it to them, and it's date stamped, you know, and everything's clear, but you just have to share the disclosure. You don't have to amend the listing agreement unless the listing agreement does not clearly state that there's cooperating and that how much of that cooperation is being done. But our current contracts do have that. So we just need to give them the disclosure as of right now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and they do not need to sign it, which is the best part. So, you know, that way.
So, and it refers to the listing that I have already on the contract, ready to close.
Yes.
And the one that is still active.
The ones that's still active is the disclosure. I would just send if any listings that you have that still have not closed, I would just send them the disclosure.
Okay, and what is the name of that disclosure?
It is called, let me just look it up because I just downloaded it yesterday.
Compensation disclosure or anything like that?
No, it's not a compensation. It's ¿cómo es que se llama? Espérate, because I just downloaded it yesterday. Where did I go? Tantas formas. I'm like, here, let me just look up disclosure because I got too much stuff in my computer. Let me see if it's this one. Okay, so there's two forms that they came out. One is the compensation disclosure form. That one does need to be signed. And then there was another one. Let me see where the other one went. There was one that was just very basic. I'm gonna have to look for it and send it to you guys. I'll post it in the room. It's very simple. It just basically discloses, like it's one line and it just says, you know, that all compensation is negotiable. So basically the same thing that is on the new contracts on the bottom. On the new contracts, there's a disclosure about all compensation is negotiable. Da, 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 da. That same pretty much sentence is what's going to be on that disclosure, and then it's just a disclosure. So you don't have to have them sign. So there's two forms, and I'm going to have to go through the other compensation form because I haven't gone through it yet, and they haven't trained on it. So I'm going to have to read that and see when that is actually best practices to use that. But right now, it's that one sentence disclosure, and they don't have to sign that one. Okay, but I'll get that information to you.
So we're talking about existing listings.
Existing listings, correct. So any active listings that have not closed, that disclosure needs to be given. Okay. All right, so.
Good morning. I do have a question.
Of course.
So I know you probably already say this, but I miss it. So where exactly we're going to find these forms, the EEBA and the showing agreements, is they're gonna be at the dot loop?
They will be in dot loop. The only reason that corporate hasn't uploaded them yet is because there's been, you know, they keep changing the forms. So in July, they changed the form twice.
Okay.
So, you know, they don't want to upload it until they say, okay, this is it. We're not making any more amendments at this point so that they can upload those forms. So they are working on that. They should be in dot loop pretty soon, but for right now, if you need one, they're going to be in My Agent. You can find them in two places. You can go to Form Simplicity and find them there. Or if you want to make your life easier, instead of searching Form Simplicity, because sometimes it's not easy searching, you can go to My Agent account under your group, either Miami Lakes, Doral, or whichever office you belong to, or the VIP group, which you know, I know that Maricruz you belong to, and under the files, And
Okay.
there, you're going to be able to find all those documents.
Perfect.
I
Thank
put
you.
them under new forms and new listing forms. So I did actually put the new listing forms on there as well, because now I remember. But it's under new forms, and you'll be able to find all those in there. Okay. And then you just download it. And if you have to upload it to your loop in case you get a consumer before it's uploaded to that loop, you just upload it there. Okay. It's just making sure that you guys are using the right contract. Okay, very important that you guys use the right contract. So let's talk a little bit about open houses. So because, some of you do open houses for other agents. So I want to make sure that you guys understand when you need to use an agreement if a buyer walks into your open house that's not represented. Okay. So obviously, if a buyer walks into your open house or an open house that you're doing and they want to see the house, you have to show the house, right? You cannot say, oh, no, if we don't have an agreement, I can't show you the house. No, you can show them the house. The only thing you cannot do is, first of all, if they start asking questions about, how much, how old is the roof, how old is this, is the seller is the price negotiable? When they start asking those types of questions, then in order for you to be able to reply to those questions, you have to have an agreement, because now you're actually giving them information that is, remember, you represent the seller. So you're under the fiduciary duty to make sure that you represent the seller. So you have to protect the seller's best interest. You're not going to share information with just any stranger about your seller's, if it's negotiable or any of that nature, right? You're not going to show any of that. And you have to ask that buyer, do you have a signed agreement right now with another realtor? Right? If they say yes, then you can say, please have your realtor contact me and I'll be able to share all that information with your realtor. And then they can share it with you. Okay. If, because we are not working together, so I can't share that information because you and I are not working together, you're working with someone else. So at that point, that's it, right? But let's say they say, no, no, I'm just, I'm looking to buy a house, but I don't have a realtor yet. Okay. In order for us to be able to give you any information regarding this property and make sure that, that I can possibly represent you in case you decide to buy this property, we're going to need minimum a showing agreement for that particular house. Okay. So what I recommend, if you're doing any open houses, that you have a showing agreement there with you. So have a couple showing agreements with you and have a couple EBBAs there with you as well. Okay. Because again, you want to be able to be prepared in case now they want to work with you. But if they want to just information on that particular property and they haven't signed anything with anyone else, you can give them a showing agreement. And then you just put that address on there. Now, if they want to go see more houses because they liked you, maybe they're not interested in that house, but they want to go look at other houses, then at that point, now you would start talking about the exclusive buyer agreement, okay? And having that marriage, right? But yes, you always have to remember, now we're going to have instances where we have listings and a buyer might call because they saw the listing on Zillow, okay? Or they saw the listing on realtor.com. And the first questions you're going to ask them is, great, Mr. Buyer, do you have a signed agreement with another real estate agent right now? Yes. Okay, please have your real estate agent contact me so we can schedule a showing. Okay. If they say, no, I'm not working with a real estate agent. Okay, Mr. Buyer, that's perfect. In order for me to show this house to you, we're going to have a signed showing agreement because we can no longer show homes unless we have an agreement in place. Are you okay with that? Yes, I'm okay with that. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and send you my showing agreement. You're going to fill out that information, get their information, fill it out, and then you're going to send them that showing agreement with your compensation on it. And you can explain, if you decide to buy this house, this is this is what I charge, basically to represent you. Okay. And they have to sign that showing agreement because there's going to be times where they're going to tell you, we've all heard the little saying, buyers are liars. So, you know, we need to make sure that, because some of them are going to be saying, oh, no, I don't have a, you know, I don't have an agreement with anybody. Okay, perfect. No problem. I'll be more than happy to show the house for you, but I need this showing agreement signed. Right. And then that will either weed out, if they're really serious about buying and they really want to see this property, they're not going to have a problem signing that showing agreement. If they don't sign that showing agreement, you just don't show the house. Okay. But that's if you have a listing and they call you from a different lead source. Okay. Because again, there's going to be people that are going to sign those agreements with their realtors. Some of them are going to sign it and not remember that they signed it. Right. And all of a sudden, now they want to work with you. Now, let's be clear. If they have a signed agreement with someone else, they come to see the property that you have listed and they do sign that showing agreement, you are owed that compensation from that buyer if they decide to buy that property. Now, what happens to the other person that they signed a contract with? Then that agent would have to go after the buyer. They cannot go after us as the brokers, because they did sign an agreement with us and we closed on the transaction that we signed a contract with. But they can go after the buyer to compensate them. Okay. So it's not like they're going to be, you know, saying, oh no, Teresa, you took my buyer, you know, they had a signed agreement with me. They signed a showing agreement with me. You know, they didn't tell me that they had an agreement with you. So now they have a showing agreement with me. I'm owed my compensation because I did show them the house. You know, so basically I was the procuring cause at that point. I showed them the house and I also did the transaction. So I am owed my commission based on that showing agreement. But then that other agent would have to go after the buyer in small claims court or do something to get their compensation if they feel that they should have been compensated because, you know, they were the exclusive buyer agent. So, you know, when you're having those conversations with your buyers, you have to be very, very clear of these situations that might happen, these scenarios, right? Mr. Buyer, if you're signing a contract with me, I am your exclusive buyer's agent. If you decide to go with another agent, you will still be responsible for paying my compensation. Our broker can still go after and sue for our compensation. So I want to make sure that you're clear that if you sign this agreement, we are working together. If you have any questions regarding any properties, you want to go see any properties, anything of that nature, you have to contact me first so that I can make arrangements to make sure that we get that house showed to you, right? Now, are there going to be situations where clients feel that you're not doing your job, right? That maybe they called you, hey, Teresa, I want to go see this property, and Teresa's busy. Oh, sorry, Mr. Smith, I can't do it right now. I can do it maybe tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And all of a sudden that house goes under, you know what I'm saying? Oh, I just lost the opportunity to make an offer on that house because you weren't available. Right. So we have to be very careful that we're creating, or we're giving good customer service too, because they can come back and say, well, you know, on this day I called Teresa because I wanted to show this property. Here's the text message. And she wasn't able to show up my property. On this day, you know, I called Teresa to do this and she was not available. You know, on this day, you know, I called Teresa to do this and she was not available to help me. Right. So now I'm not giving the service that my client deserves. Right. So for the part-time agents that are, you know, doing this part-time, it might be difficult, you know, like you have to make sure that you're clear with your buyer that you are their representative, but you also have to make sure that you are giving them the service that they deserve, right? Because if they're willing, if they're obligated to pay you a compensation, you're obligated as your fiduciary duties as their representative, be able to provide the services that we are supposed to provide. Okay. So just be clear on that, but be clear with your buyers on those agreements. Okay.
One question.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, the showing agreement is enough to submit an offer?
Yes, the showing agreement is enough to submit an offer.
Okay.
On the property that's listed on that showing agreement. So it's only the properties that are listed in that showing agreement. So if you, let's say today you want to go show your client 3 houses and they're still iffy about signing that exclusive buyer agreement, they can do a showing agreement. You can list the 3 properties you're going to show them. And if they want to buy any of those 3 properties, you're owed your compensation because the compensation is on there. Okay. But
Perfect.
if they
Yeah.
want to go see, and my recommendation, guys, you know, only use the showing agreement for 1, 2, maybe 3 houses. That's it. You know, after that, you're working with them. You're married to them. You're not dating. You know, you might go on 1 or 2 dates to see if we even like each other, right? But you know, if you're already showing house number 6, number 7, number 8, you're already married. That's not dating anymore, right? So that's when you have to make sure that that showing agreement is only used for certain instances where maybe it's a new person, they don't know you yet, you know, they want to get to know you, and you know, you can, and it's because it states on the showing agreement, Mr. Buyer, you, if you decide to see more properties or whatever, you might have to sign an EBBA agreement, right? So you know, it's being clear, but you can just tell your buyer, look, you know, I'm okay showing you using the showing agreement for these particular properties only, because there's going to be buyers that say, oh, you know, I only want to, you know, like see 2 or 3 properties in this neighborhood, you know, and that's it, right? But again, even when you're showing that agreement, you have to be very clear with them. Mr. Buyer, do you have a signed agreement with another real estate agent or another broker? Please, I need you to make sure, because when you sign the showing agreement, and if you decide to buy this house, you cannot come back with your you cannot come back with your real estate agent, because I'm going to be owed the compensation, right? So just be transparent with your buyers, because I think that we need to be transparent with the buyers, because there's going to be some buyers that are going to be shady, right? They're going to try to go around the system. You know, they have a cousin that they have an exclusive buyer agreement signed with, but the cousin's not available. So I'm going to call Maricruz and see if she'll show me the property today, you know, because she's available. And then they'll tell you, no, I don't have a signed agreement. And now, you know, Maricruz is showing them a property. If Maricruz shows them a property, there has to be an agreement in place. So if they buy that house, Maricruz is owed her commission. She showed the property, they had a showing agreement, they signed the showing agreement, Maricruz gets the commission. But now the cousin, if they wanted to go after them, then they can go after them, right, for their commission. But they cannot go after our commission. Okay, which is a good thing, because that's protecting us as the real estate agents. So that's a good thing for us. But again, just be very clear with your buyers. You know, it's better to be clear and them not sign it, and that's it. Because if they didn't sign it, it's because there había un gato escondido somewhere. There was a little cat hidden somewhere, right? Like they say. So that's it. See you later. You know, next. Pero you want to make sure that you secure your compensation. Yes, Janet.
No, I was just saying, so when you're doing an open house, just to go back, and they sign that showing agreement, one that is not representative, you are entitled to, if we put an offer, you're entitled to a commission.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct.
But if they're having, and they're not being honest, and they have a representative, they have a realtor, and they sign that, you still get a commission.
You still get owed your compensation. Now
Oh,
the person that the real estate agent that they signed the EBBA with, now that realtor can go after, or that broker can go after their compensation, right? Because you know, they did have a signed agreement, but you know, they came to you, they signed a showing agreement to see that property, you know, offering compensation. So even if, you know, they are responsible for your compensation, pretty much, period. Now the other broker can go after the buyer, you know, to get their compensation, because they did have an EBBA with them, but it doesn't affect your compensation. They can't go after your compensation.
But Teresa, what about, because we never know how buyers are, what about if that buyer decide, when they realize that they did sign the contract, the showing agreement, or the EBA form with the other realtor, and they decide, and then also they sign it with us, and then they decide that, oh no, wait a minute, I made a mistake, let me go back to, can they go back and forth? How did that situation?
Well, they can, you know, there's going to be a situation where they might sign that showing agreement, and then they go and make the offer with the other agent, right? Because they realize, oh shoot, I signed an EBBA with the other agent. But now you, as the broker, can go after the buyer.
Oh,
So
okay.
they can still, you know, get their compensation if the offer came in through the other agent, you know, but at the same time, they signed a showing agreement with you. You're the one that showed them the property, so you can now go after them. That's
Okay.
why those agreements are really important to put you know, like from what date to what date that agreement is in place, right? We have to make sure that there's a termination date that, you know, at least that gives you some time, because they might do that, right? They might sign a showing agreement with you today because you were available to show them the house. And then they go out and see, oh, you know, I'm going to go look at more houses. They go back to their agent takes them to go see more houses. And all of a sudden they say, you know what? I still like that first house I saw, you know, which they have an agreement with you. And now they go back to make an offer on that house that you showed them. So, but you have to make sure that those dates are
Okay.
spread out enough to cover you. So it's not like it's a showing agreement from today to tomorrow, right? No, I would put at least you know, on this particular property, at least 3 months, right? Especially since properties are taking longer to sell right now. So I would at least put 3 months on that expiration of that agreement. Because if they, again, they go see
Because they
20
could
other
go back.
houses and then they come back, right, and make an offer on that particular house, it covers you because that agreement is still in place. Okay. So expiration dates are really important on those contracts, which, you know, obviously, you know, I've talked about those in the recordings. Those are really important, and so is cancellation fees, right? Most of the time in our listing agreements, we don't put a cancellation fee. We tell the you know, the seller this, and now we have a contract with the buyer. So we might say, oh no, Mr. Buyer, if you don't want to work with me, that's fine. I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to charge you anything if you don't want to work with me. But you know what? You just showed them 20 houses. You spend gas, you spend time, you know, and now you're saying, oh, Mr. Buyer, it's okay. If you don't want to work with me, that's fine. I'm not going to charge you a cancellation fee. No, no, charge them a cancellation fee because they did take up your time. Put a cancellation
Mhm.
fee in there, because if there's no cancellation fee, guess what? Oh, I don't have any cancellation fee. I don't have anything. I'm just going to cancel it. I'm going to go work with my cousin, right? After you just showed them 20 houses. So have a cancellation fee in there. Your time, I can't stress this enough, that your time is valuable. Your time is very valuable. And there's no reason for you guys not to have compensation for your time. So as nice as we want to be sometimes with buyers and sellers, you know, again, if I had a contract and I knew that I can break it and I had no ramification, I'll break it. No problem. But if I knew that if I broke that contract, I'm going to have to pay $3,000, $4,000 if I break that contract, guess what? I'm going to think about breaking that contract. Right? Because I know that there's a ramification, there's a dollar amount attached to it. So, you know, in my personal opinion, you should definitely, and my professional opinion, you should definitely put in there a cancellation fee, whether it's a listing or whether it's a buyer. Because again, if there's no ramification for their actions, then they're gonna just go, forget it. I don't want to work with Oneida. I'm just gonna go work with Teresa. You know, she showed me more houses, so I'm just gonna work with her. I'm gonna just cancel Oneida's contract. Yet Oneida just showed them 15 houses and spent 2 weekends showing them houses. Same thing with
Is that
listings.
is
Hmm?
that apply also for rental or just
No, rentals are not included. However, if you use an EBBA with a rental, which you can, there is a part there where you can charge a retainer. Okay. So let's say you and I, Janet, you're my client, and I say, Janet, absolutely, I'll go show you to see some apartments. I do charge $1,000, right, for my services to go show you as many apartments as we want. This is my fee. That needs to be paid up front or whatever, $500, whatever you want to put on there. That's my fee to go show you X amount of properties. Okay, that is due up front. That is a retainer. That is a non-refundable retainer. So that means that is your retainer. So if they decide to go rent with someone else, they've already paid you your retainer, right? So now you can go, so it almost guarantees them to keep working with you rather than jump from agent to agent like most of the tenants do, right? Because now I'm like, oh, well, I paid Janet $500. I'm not going to go with this one over here and now go find an apartment with her when I paid Janet. Let me just finish with Janet and have her find my apartment, right? Now, can you give, it's a non-refundable, but you can say, Mr. Tenant, you know, this is my fee, $1,000. However, when we do find a rental, if the listing side is paying compensation for that rental, I will deduct the $1,000 from that compensation or $500 from that compensation, right? You can do that, but at least it guarantees you that the money's paid up front, right? And the check has to be made out to La Rosa Realty. Okay, it cannot be made out to you has to be made out to La Rosa Realty, and we have to get that check deposited right away. You cannot keep that check, just like the rentals that you cannot keep, you know, for a certain amount of time. You know, you have 2 or 3 days to get that rental deposit into the broker's account. So you need to make sure that those rental checks and any type of referral checks or anything, any checks, that it gets to the broker right away. Okay. So you have to make sure of that. So if they pay you that retainer, you have to basically get that retainer deposited so that you can get it to the broker so they can deposit it so that you can get your, you know, your retainer fee, right? Okay. And don't get in trouble. But no, you don't need don't necessarily need an EBBA with a tenant if you desire not to have one. Okay. But obviously, again, you're going to have to determine whether the selling side or the landlord side is paying compensation, or the listing broker of that thing is paying compensation. Because let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of agents who are going to get greedy. And I hope none of us are those agents, but they're going to get greedy and they're not going to want to share compensation, knowing that they could, you know, that the buyers now have to pay or the tenants now can get a retainer, you know, so they might just say, nope, I'll offer, like, we might go, especially here in South Florida and Central Florida. Maricruz is used to this, you know, the referral fee is $50, $100 maybe at the most for a rental. That's how much they get paid for a rental. So, you know, I don't, how do I put it? I can foresee that happening in South Florida. Okay. So with that being said, you know, you just have to make sure that your compensation is secured before you show anything. You know, even with tenants, even though you don't need that EBBA, you still need to make sure that that listing side, because it's not going to be on the MLS anymore, that they're paying half a month or that they're paying $1,000 or whatever they're paying. It's not going to show on the MLS. So you have to call that listing side to make sure that there's compensation. But that's why you need to secure your compensation with the tenant as well, right? Because if they say no, or they really want that apartment, you need to make sure that that compensation is there for yourself. Okay. Any questions about buyers contracts, when you need to use them?
Going back, I have a question. Going back, I recall that the listing agent, you can't have both, right? The compensation from the seller and the compensation from the buyer, right?
Of course, if you represent both.
You
So
can.
let's say you have a seller that only wants to pay 4%. They're saying on the contract, because this is another thing of those listing agreements. Now the seller has an option, okay, of whether they want to pay or whether they don't want to pay, whether they're going to let you cooperate with your commission or your compensation, or they're not going to let you cooperate with your compensation. So the listing agreement, to be honest with you, I think is a bunch of hogwash. I mean, the way it's worded, you know, to me, not the best. And I'm disclosing this because I really feel about, you know, that the listing agreement. I think that listing agreement is going to have to be altered at one point or another, right? Because as it stands right now, it's telling the seller, Mr. Seller, if you decide, here are your options, A, B, C, D, whatever, or A, B, C. These are your options. You're going to pay Teresa 5%, 6%. But here, are you allowing Teresa to share her compensation or the broker's compensation, La Rosa's compensation, with another broker that brings a buyer, right? That's one of the options. The other option is, no, I don't want Teresa to share her compensation. I will just pay Teresa 3% and I will pay the buyer's broker whatever I want to pay the buyer's broker, right? On the selling side. Then the other option is I don't want to pay anything to the buyer's agent, right? So now they have 3 options. But what is that telling us? That's what we got sued for.
Yeah.
We got sued, or NAR got sued, right? Because the sellers said that they were paying the compensation when they really weren't. They were
Now
paying
they are.
they're paying the listing agent, and the listing broker is willing to cooperate. They paid La Rosa Realty 6%, Teresa's the agent, and now La Rosa and Teresa are willing to use some of that money to market the property, and obviously if someone else brings the buyer, to compensate that as part of my marketing costs, right? I'm compensating now the buyer's agent. And so it was coming out of our commission. Did it say, did it disclose on the listing agreement that Mr. Seller, just to be clear, just to disclose, out of that 6% that you're paying La Rosa Realty and Teresa, we're willing to cooperate 2.5%, 3%, whatever, with the buyer side. It disclosed it, right? So now the verbiage is making it seem like the seller did pay compensation. It's making it seem like the seller actually paid the compensation to the buyer's broker, not the listing brokerage. Because now it's selling, Mr. Listing Brokerage, I'm going to pay you 5%, but I don't want you to pay a buyer's agent from that money. Or it's going to say, yes, I want to pay the buyer's broker. Now it's giving the seller the option to pay the buyer's broker. And or no, I don't want to pay the buyer's broker. Right? So now it's giving them 3 options. So it's going to be very, very interesting moving forward with these listing conversations that we're having, because now it's giving the seller an option, which before it was, they paid XYZ, whatever we decided to charge, hey, I charge for my services 5%, 6%, 7%, 10%. I don't care. This is what I charge for my services. Yes, Teresa, I'm okay paying you 7% to sell my house. I go, okay, I'm going to cooperate, Mr. Seller, just to let you know, if another broker brings the buyer, I'm willing to cooperate. I'm just letting you know that we are going to cooperate from that 6% or 7% that you're paying me. I'm going to cooperate with a buyer's broker from the money that you're paying me, from the compensation you're paying me. And we always disclose that, right? But now I think this new contract is really going to create more headaches. And I think it's probably going to be modified at some point or another again. So, but right now that's what it states. So it's giving the seller the options. Okay. So if you are representing the seller and he puts on the contract, I am not paying a buyer's broker, you can collect the compensation. Let's say a buyer, now you're representing both parties, right? You're representing the buyer and you're representing the seller. The seller's paying you your compensation, but they strictly said, Teresa, I'm not paying a buyer's agent. So that money is, I'm just paying you to sell my house, but I'm not paying a buyer's agent. I'm not agreeing to cooperate. And a buyer comes and they're unrepresented, and now they want to buy that house with you because you're the listing agent. You can still charge the buyer to represent them. They still have to sign an EBBA. Okay. Even if it's your listing, if a buyer comes to your listing, they still have to sign an EBBA with compensation that they have to pay you for you to be able to represent them. Because right here, you're representing the seller. But if before it used to be, oh, the buyers come nowhere. I'm just keeping both sides of the commission, right? Because I got the buyer, so I'm keeping both sides of the commission. I don't have to cooperate because I'm just keeping my commission, right? And that was okay. But now, if the seller's saying, no, Teresa, I don't want you to cooperate, you can't cooperate. You can't share your compensation. So that
Oh,
means that if a buyer comes, even if he's paying you 4%, let's say he's paying you 4%, and you're okay, I'm okay giving 2% of my commission to help the buyer buy the house, right? If he put on that listing agreement, I don't want you to pay a buyer, I don't want you to cooperate, and I'm not paying a buyer's agent, period, you cannot share your compensation. So
oh,
that
wow.
means that if a buyer comes, you're gonna have to have an EBBA signed by that buyer, because now you're representing the buyer and the seller. So now the seller will pay you your compensation, and whatever you decide to charge the buyer, it could be 1%. Maybe the seller's paying you 3% and you're okay just charging the buyer's agent 1%, right? Or the buyer's 1%. You can do that, right? Now you got a total of 4% or 5%, whatever. You can do that, but you can get paid from both sides. Yes. As long as it's disclosed that you're getting paid from both sides, right? Which will be disclosed because now you have an EBBA signed by the buyer and you have a listing agreement signed by the seller, right? They're both signed. They both agreed to pay you compensation. So you can collect from both sides. But you do need an EBBA signed by that buyer with whatever compensation you're charging that buyer. Okay. It's let's put it this way. This is the easy way of thinking about this. Doesn't matter what side you're representing. You need a signed agreement. Period. Whether that's the buyer, that's the seller, you need a signed agreement. Before, we didn't need to have that EBBA. It wasn't a requisite, a required document, it wasn't required, right? Because we were used to cooperating from whatever the listing side paid us or the seller paid us. We were used to cooperating. But now, since the sellers are now, oh, well, no, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent. I heard on the news that I don't have to pay a buyer's agent, right? No, you don't, you never did, Mr. Seller. You never paid the buying agent. You paid us, and we decided to cooperate with our commission, right? We have to make that clear. I go, but if you decide that you don't want to let me cooperate with what you're giving me, we've agreed upon selling your house, that's fine. But just remember that your house is probably not going to sell that fast, because now you're limiting the pool of buyers, because not every buyer can afford to pay the compensation to the other real estate agent. So what's going to happen? You went from possibly 5,000 buyers that might be interested in your house to now 100 buyers that might be interested in your house, right? That can afford to pay the compensation for the other side of the other the agent who's representing them. So, you have to just start to educate your sellers as well, because you're going to get that pushback. But if you do, again, we are a cooperating brokerage. We have always been a cooperating brokerage. I don't foresee that changing, like some of these brokers who are saying they're no longer cooperating. They're just going to take their money. And if you make an offer, at that point, we'll decide what we want to do. But we have always been a cooperating broker. We always want to be a cooperating broker, because that's how this business was built, right? If you're a listing agent, you need the buyer's agents. You need people to bring you buyers so you can sell the house fast, right? Because what's the sense of having, I'm going to use Puerto Rico, for instance. Puerto Rico does not have cooperation. Can they cooperate? Yes. But most agents here do not cooperate. What happens with those houses? They sit there and they sit there and they sit there. I've seen listings that have sat there for a year. Okay? Because they're not cooperating. And so if another agent sees that they're, and we know it because it's been done this whole time, even though it's the wrong thing to do. It's not ethical for you to do this. Another thing I wanted to cover, we cannot tell the buyer, like let's say you're working with a buyer, you're telling them you're going to charge them 3%. to represent them, right? And they say, oh no, well, Teresa, just show, I only want to see properties that that pay compensation because I can't afford to pay you. We cannot filter in the MLS. You have to send them everything that fits their criteria. So you're going to have to explain that to the buyer, Mr. Buyer. You know, that's understandable, but that to us is almost steering, or there's, you know, there's other words. I forgot what the other word was, which I'll find out. But that's like us, you know, you're telling us to go this way, but you're telling us you want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a pool. It's my fiduciary duty to send you all the 3 baths with 2 bedrooms and a pool, because those are the things that you want. I have to share with everything on the MLS that is of that description. I cannot filter by who's paying compensation and who's not paying compensation, because compensation is no longer shown on the MLS anyway. So I'm going to have to show you everything. When you see a house that you like and you want to go see, I will be able to call the listing broker and see if they're offering compensation. Okay? If they are, I will come back to you and say, yes, Mr. Buyer, they are offering compensation. Do you want to go see this house? Or no, Mr. Buyer, they are not offering compensation. Do you want to go see this house? And then it'll be up to the buyer to decide. Oh my God, no, I love the house, because we can't filter that in, because it's not the right way. It's like when agents used to look at the compensation, go through the MLS, okay, all the 3 2s with a pool, and they say, okay, this one's paying 1%, this one's paying 3%, this one's paying 2.5%. Okay, I'm just gonna send the client the one that's paying 3% and the one that's paying 2%. The one that's paying 2%, I'm not even gonna send it to my client, because there were agents that were doing that. Right? That is not ethical. Because if it fits their description of the homes that they want to buy, that should not be based on the compensation that the other side is paying, right? Because our responsibility is to that buyer. So we keep our responsibility to that buyer. You can say, Mr. Buyer, I'm going to send you all the homes that fit your needs. Now, if you see one that you like, I'll be more than happy to call and find out if they're offering compensation or not. And then you can make the decision of what you want to do. But I cannot not send you, you know, based on compensation. I have to send you everything that's available. And let's see here.
So I have a quick question, Teresa. Sure. Okay, so I think we all have the same question, and maybe you can help us. So what would be the best compensation, or the fair compensation that we will be able to charge? Or we
cannot disclose that. That is against fair, that is antitrust. Okay. So we cannot discuss that. We cannot, the only one that can give you a guideline is the broker. And the broker has not given us a guideline yet. Our guideline has always been preferred 6%. They've never said you have to charge 6%.
Right.
Preferably 6%, right? As far as a listing, you know, like the full compensation for a listing. Right. Now they're probably going to have a preferred compensation for buyers. But let me tell you this, Maricruz, if you put on the contract, because again, you know, we cannot discuss on Zoom or anything else compensation, because obviously we're recording this, and you know, so we cannot share compensation as to how much we are recommending you to charge, how much we recommend you to do this. We can't do that. That is totally, you're an independent contract. Are we gonna have, hey, we prefer that you charge minimum this? Yes, we can have that. But you're an independent contractor. Obviously, you can do whatever you want as an independent contractor when it comes to that. We're only going to make recommendations, and it's totally up to you, right? And your buyer, because everything's negotiable, right? You as an agent have to create the value for you. You're the only one that can create your own value. So if I feel that, hey, I do a good job when I'm working with my clients, I do a good job. I go beyond what I need to do, right? I'll show you 100 houses if you want to see 100 houses, but my compensation is this. This is what I charge for my professional fees, right? up to the buyer to decide whether they're okay working with you and agreeing to pay that compensation, right? Now, what you want to keep in mind is the rules of NAR. If you put on a buyer's contract that you're only going to charge that buyer 2%, just let's just use 2 apples here, that you're only going to charge 2 apples to this buyer, right? And now they see a house, they love this house, they want to make an offer on this house. You call the listing agent, and the listing agent is paying 3 apples. How much are you going to get paid, Maricruz? 2
Oh,
apples.
I'm sorry. 2 apples, yes.
Even if the seller is paying, or the selling side, not the seller, the selling side is paying 3 apples. So you just lost 1 apple. You're only going to get paid 2 apples.
Okay, yes.
So
I
keep that in
understand.
mind, okay?
Yes.
Because if you obviously we're gonna, oh my God, they can't afford it, I'm just gonna charge them 1%, because I know that that's hard for them to come up with that extra money. But if you decide that, be prepared to only get paid 1%, period. You cannot charge the buyer 1 apple and try to collect 3 apples from the listing side. Cannot do that. Okay? So you have to make sure that whatever you put in that buyer's agreement is going to cover possibly what the listing side is going to pay, so that you're not shorted out. Okay? Now, can there be a modification to that agreement? Yes, of course. Let's say you signed an agreement with me and you said, Teresa, I'm only going to charge you 1 apple, right? I'm going to try to get, my 2 apples from, or 3 apples from XYZ, right? And you find a property, I want to make an offer on that property, but now that you find out, Maricruz, that property is offering 3 apples, but you know that you agreed to only 1 apple with Teresa. So now you have to go back to Teresa and say, Teresa, I know that we agreed to 1 apple. However, this house is actually paying 3 apples. So I'm going to have to modify this agreement so that I can get paid my 3 apples. And you can do that. Now, do you want to risk that the buyer says, no, I'm sorry, I'm not signing a new agreement. You agreed to 1%, or 1 apple. I don't feel comfortable now signing that I can possibly have to pay 3 apples. Right? Because they're looking at a contract that is between you and them, that you're charging them those 3 apples. So they might not want to sign that modification of agreement. And now you're stuck with only receiving 1 apple. Right? So I'd rather you be upfront and say, Mr. Buyer, my compensation is 3 apples. Okay? That's my compensation. I want 3 apples. But Mr. Buyer, if the selling side is paying 5 apples, I'm okay only charging you 1 apple. Right? So as long as I get my 3 apples. So you can do that, but you don't want to shortchange yourself and then have to go back to the buyer to try to get them to sign a modification of compensation. Right? So I'd rather put that in there, or Mr. Buyer, my fee is 3 apples. I'm going to try my best to get you into a property that hopefully they are going to be compensating 3 apples, so that you don't have to pay me those 3 apples. But if they're paying 2 apples, Mr. Buyer, that just means you only have to pay me 1 apple. Right? But I'd rather you have more than have less and then have to try to modify. Because then getting a buyer to sign a new contract that says that they went from 1 apple to 3 apples is going to be pretty hard. Right? They're going to be like, I don't know if I feel comfortable about that. So I'd rather you put more and reduce it than put less and then have to try to increase it because someone else, for new constructions, for instance. New constructions might pay a bonus. New construction might be paying four apples and you only put 3 apples on your contract. It still applies to new construction, by the way. If you put 3 apples on that contract, you can only charge 3 apples, even if the developer is paying 4, unless you go back and modify that agreement with the buyer. So there's a way that you can kind of get around that. You can say, Mr. Buyer, I'm okay charging you 3 apples. Janet, you seem frustrated already.
Wait, let me ask you something. Okay,
Because, like,
Teresa. Okay, let me ask you
like,
something.
you can screw yourself from getting what you're supposed to be getting.
Yes, but
much.
let me see if I can understand this, because it's just too much. Okay, so wait. So let me see if I got it. Yeah, let me see if I got it. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure that I get this, because this is very important for all of us, and I know there are gonna be people watching this, and I know this is a really good question. So okay, so I have the buyer signing the agreement, right? That the showing all this, the agreement that they need to show for the compensation, right? Boom, is already done. I put 3 apples in there. Boom, is 3 apples in there. Okay, fine. Then I go to let's do a seller. So seller, they would like this house, and this house, that seller is giving compensation also to the buyer, right? So if they do 6%, I mean, 6 apples, sorry, the 6 apples, right? And then we know how that is gonna divide. So the seller,
well, we don't know how that's going to divide, so don't assume.
Okay, so we don't know, but let's assume that they are going to you use a word a little bit, cooperate with the seller, right, with the buyer. So they're going to cooperate. So we know that if it's that case, we're going to have those 3 apples in there. So we're getting, this is what I'm confused now. We're getting the 3 apples from the seller and the 3 apples from the buyer?
No.
All right,
you cannot charge the buyer, the consumer, more than what's on the agreement. So if you're already getting the payment through the selling side, then you do not charge the buyer.
Perfect.
You can only,
that was my whole
it's
question.
only one, you can only get paid once. The only time that you might be able to collect from the buyer and collect from the seller is if you have the listing and you acquire the buyer. Now you can charge the seller for whatever he said that he was going to pay you to sell his house. I'm going to pay you 3 apples to sell my house. And now you procured the buyer. Now you can tell the Mr. Buyer, in order for me to represent you, my compensation is 3 apples. So now you can collect both sides.
Got it. Thank you. Now I'm good.
Okay. Janet, you seem confused. Tell me which part you're confused about.
I kind of know, but it's just like it's a really gambling game here.
It is going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting because that's why I'm telling you that it's easier for you to put more, right? Give yourself your value. What are you worth? This is the question. What are you okay getting paid to represent your buyer? What are you okay with? Is it a flat fee? Mr. Buyer, I only charge $5,000. Doesn't matter if the compensation is $10,000. I only charge $5,000. That's it, right? Or a percentage, because you can do a flat fee or a percentage. So now, but you're saying this is what my value is. This is what I'm okay receiving.
Okay.
But if that's less than what the listing side is willing to compensate a buyer's agent, you cannot get the difference. You can only charge whatever is on the agreement with that buyer.
Right.
So I'd rather put 3% and on the contract. That was what I wanted to talk on new construction, because we know that new construction has bonuses sometimes. Sometimes they have they'll pay 4% instead of 3%, or you're on that, if you sell 3 houses, the percentage keeps going up, so there's different things with new construction. So to cover yourself, there's the section that says, Mr. Buyer, this is my regular compensation, right? There's a little section on the bottom that says other terms. You can put under other or other terms if, and I have the verbiage, I will look for it and I will make sure that you guys get it. But basically, it's just states that if you decide to buy a new construction, it's not those exact words, but I'll get those exact words. But if you decide to buy new construction, this is my compensation. So if you buy a
Okay.
resale, this is my compensation. If you
Mm.
buy a new construction, this is going to be
This
my
is my
compensation. And
compensation.
you can include, you
A
know,
bonus.
3% plus any applicable bonuses, right? So now at least, and it's not that exact verbiage, I'll get the verbiage to you, but now you can have both. Mr. Buyer, if you decide to buy resale, this is what I charge. If you decide to go with new construction, this is what my fee is going to be, right? So now you can elevate that fee. Maybe you can put 5% for that fee if you decide to buy new construction, because we know that some developers are paying, you know, some high rates in some places. So I'd rather
Now, let
you
me,
cover yourself, and if they're not, if you find them a new construction that's only paying 3 apples, then that's okay, because I got it covered over here, Mr. Buyer. So, you know, if they pay 3 apples and I'm okay receiving 3 apples, don't worry, you don't have to pay me the 5 apples. I'll just take the 3 apples.
and now let me ask you, going to a different route of the pre-approval.
Mhm.
The pre-approval have to also show that they can get the compensation for us as well, because before it was a down deposit, the closing, and now we have to prove that they can pay us.
Correct. So that's where those net sheets are going to come in handy, right? So when you're working with a buyer, you should be doing a net sheet regardless, whether you're working with a seller or a buyer, just to give the
Right.
buyer an idea of what costs, what closing costs they're going to have. So once you get the approval from the lender, you can ask the lender, okay, Mr. Lender, what is their really, you should be saying, you know, Mr. Lender, when you do the pre-approval and you have the numbers, can you share those numbers with me before you share them with my client? Because I want to make sure that I include my compensation in the net sheet. So I need to know how much your closing costs are, so then I can add my fee and include that in the closing cost, so I make sure that the buyer is ready. Okay. So at that point, you know, once you know what the closing costs are going to be from the lender, let's say the closing cost, the lender says the closing costs are going to be $12,000, right? With their down payment, right? So now if you know that they're down, you know, let's say it's $20,000, just to make an even number. $20,000, that's going to be the closing cost, down payment, and closing costs, right? That's the total that they're going to have to bring to the closing table.
Right.
Now you know how much that is. Now you can add your compensation, your 2%, 3%, whatever you're going to charge them. You can add that to the $20,000. And now when you present it to the buyer, Mr. Buyer, you know, this is how much you got approved for. This is how much the closing costs are from the lender. This is the closing cost for my compensation. So these are your total closing costs. Your closing costs are going to be $27,000, whatever, instead of 20, right? $27,000. Do you have $27,000 in the bank? How are you going to get that $20,000? Are you going to get a gift, or $27,000? Are you getting a gift? You know, but you just need to make them aware that there's a possibility that they're going to have to bring $27,000 to the closing table, right? Now, if you get your apples from the listing side, then they're not going to have to bring 27. They'll be happy because
Right.
now at the closing table, they're only going to need 20,
We're gonna have to-
you know, so now they're going to be happier, right? So that's where you need to make sure that you understand that those things are very important. Okay. So be very clear with that. So anything else on the buyer's end? We already covered which form you need to use depending on the situation, whether it's an EBBA or a showing agreement, right?
Mhm.
We already talked about open houses and how you would work the open house situation. We talked about, you know, what your apples should be as far as compensation is concerned. And we talked about I think that was it. I think that covered pretty much it on the buyer side. Okay.
Mhm.
Now that let's go a little bit into the listing side. What questions do you have on the listing side?
I
if
mean,
you're a
it's funny
listing
how
agent.
it's funny how you say that we are all in this because the seller was complaining about contributing to his commission to the buyer side, but now it's all in the open where they have the decision to make, and most likely they are gonna do the
Choose no.
compensation.
Mhm.
Exactly.
No, most likely they're going to choose no. I don't want to give more money,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Especially if, let's say, I had the conversation and the first conversation is, Mr. Seller, I charge 5 apples for my work. Okay.
So in other
Just
words, we are agreeing, we're agreeing if the seller wants to do the compensation, like we're just, I don't know, I just see it like we're back to the same thing.
yes, and I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see the new exclusive right of listing agreement, because I think that that's going to end the section what I'm talking about. Obviously, I'm going to do a class on that, but listing. Let me see if I find that exclusive right of sale listing. Commercial, no brokerage, single agent, transition. Hold on, because there's like 5 different ones, so I got to find the right one. Single agent, agreement, transaction broker, this one. Okay. Let me share this one real quick. Okay, so I'm not going to go over this because I'm going to give a class on this, but this is I want to show just the compensation. Okay, right here, compensation seller, right? So this kind of stayed the same. The part where you put in what you're charging, your apples, how many apples you're going to charge or whatever, depending on what they decide to do, right? But on this side here, this is the interesting side right here, number 10. It says seller, they have 3 choices. Seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker in the amount of 2%, 1%, whatever, of the purchase price or a flat fee, right? This amount will be paid from the broker to buyer's broker. So this is the cooperating one. This is me. I get 5%. I want to share 2.5% with Janet, right? I'm gonna cooperate, okay, with Janet. So this is where he would agree. The seller now authorizes. This is the word that gets me. Authorizes. Okay. The broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker in the amount, This amount will be paid from broker to buyer's broker from the compensation amount agreed to in paragraph 8, which is whatever you put here. You put 5%, 6%, 4%, 3%, whatever you put in here that you're charging for the listing. He's authorizing you to pay whatever the other broker is, what amount or flat fee from that 5%, 6%, whatever you charged, okay? The other one says seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker from seller in the amount of XYZ of the purchase price or a flat amount. This compensation will be set forth in a separate written agreement between seller and buyer's broker. So this is the one that's saying, let's say, Teresa, I want to sell my house. I'm going to pay you 4% to sell my house, but I don't want you to share your compensation. I'm willing to pay the buyer's broker 1%.
1%.
Let's say, that's just an example. Or I'm willing to pay the buyer's broker, $3,000, right? So now it's giving him authorization that he's going to pay the buyer's broker, not the listing brokerage is going to pay the buyer's broker. So it's not going to be from the listing broker to the buyer's broker. It's going to be from the seller to the buyer's broker. So it's going to be a separate compensation agreement that is set forth when you speak to the listing agent and they say, I am not paying compensation, but however, the seller is willing to pay 1 apple, right?
Okay.
So now I have to send a compensation agreement that is, remember the compensation agreements, there's 2 compensation agreements right now that we're using, is the seller's broker to buyer's broker, and the seller to buyer's broker. So the one seller's broker to buyer's broker is the cooperating one, the one that the brokerages are cooperating. The other one is that the seller is paying the buyer's broker directly through their closing proceeds. Okay. So now if that happens, then at that point, that's what's, that's basically what it's saying there. So that the seller's okay paying 1%, or Teresa, I'll pay you 3% to list my house, and I'm okay paying 1% to the buyer's broker. Okay. So now you have that. Then you have no compensation will be offered to buyer's broker. So now they have to choose that one, or that one. Okay. But the verbiage to me is seller authorizes, right? Seller authorizes. So now it's really making it sound like the seller is paying the compensation, not the broker here, right? Before it only gave this option pretty much, right? It's, hey, seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to broker in the amount of this, right? That's what it was before, only this one. Now it has seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to the seller's agent, and no compensation will be offered. So now they have a choice, right? And that's where the confusion is going to be, and that's why that conversation with the seller is going to be super, super important, because you're going to want to make sure that they understand the ramifications of whichever one they choose. This is the normal one, right? I'm paying you 5 apples, Teresa, and you're going to share 2 apples with Janet. I'm okay with that, right? From your compensation, from the 5% I'm giving you, the 5 apples I'm giving you. The other one is, no, I'm going to pay you 3% to sell my house. If I get an offer, I'm willing to pay 1%, $3,000, whatever they agree on, to a buyer's broker, whoever brings the buyer. I'm willing to do that. But then that's when you would need the broker, the compensation agreement that's from broker to broker. This one, you would need the compensation agreement that's from seller to broker. Okay. Again, this is going to take a little time for us to remember which compensation agreement. You're always going to have to go back to your listing agreement to see what they agreed upon. Right? If you don't remember, oh shoot, was it broker to broker, or did they agree to seller to brokerage, right? Or did they agree not to pay compensation at all? So it might just give you, that, you might have to go back to that. Okay. But this is what that listing agreement now states.
But not
So
only that, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Okay.
but not only that, but we are, it's just common sense, right? If you don't want to do that as a seller, and then like you say in the beginning, how fast you wanna sell your house.
Sell your house. Mm-hmm.
That's the key right there. That's the key right there. So I think we as realtors, as agents, are we entitled to mention that? Yes, you say yes, right?
Of course, of course. We can, because we can, we can ask them, okay, Mr. Seller, I'm okay with that, but how fast the first conversation is, how soon do you want to sell this house? Oh, Teresa, I need to be in Georgia because, my kids are getting married and I want to buy a house before they get married, whatever. They give you all the whole story, why they're selling their house and how soon they want to sell it. Some of them will say, I'm not in a hurry to sell the house. Okay, well, you're not in a hurry. Now you know that, right? They're not in a hurry. So when they say no, they don't want to pay compensation, okay, Mr. Seller, I understand. You're not in a hurry to buy your house. I just want to make you aware that it could take a year. Are you okay with that? Because it's going to take me longer as one person to find you a buyer than it is for 15,000 agents that are working to find you a buyer. Is going to happen, right? So if you don't want to pay, if you don't want to agree for me to cooperate from my compensation, then that just means I can't cooperate from my compensation. So that's going to remove a lot of buyers from the pool, right? And it's going to remove a lot of, and for me to be able to find the buyer is going to be, I'm only one person. Real estate has always been a cooperating business, where we cooperate with other agents because we know that all those agents are going to come to show your house, and obviously they need to get paid, and obviously they're going to say, well, why can't the buyer pay them? Well, the buyer can pay them. The buyer can pay them, but the pool is going to be a lot smaller because there's a lot of buyers that can afford to pay your house or buy your house, but they don't have that extra money. Just like possibly when you bought your house, because remember when you bought your house, you didn't have to pay the buyer's compensation. The listing side paid the buyer's compensation. The seller pretty much agreed to pay the listing agent enough money so that they can pay a buyer's broker, right? You didn't have to, when you bought a house, you didn't have to pay your buyer's agent. The listing side paid the buyer's agent, right? And don't you want for your next house, do you want to pay a buyer's broker for your next house? Because you're going to have to pay a buyer's agent to help you find your next home. Are you okay paying them to help you find the next home? Or would you prefer that you found a home where the seller was willing to cooperate as the listing agent, with the listing agent to market your property? So it's conversations that we need to have with them. So again, how fast do you want to sell the house? No, I need to be in Georgia in 3 months. Okay, Mr. Seller, the only way that we're going to be able to do this is if we cooperate with the 2,500 other agents or 25,000 other agents in our MLS, so that we can try to market this property and sell this property as quickly as possible. And in order for us to do that, I need to be able to have enough money from the money that you're paying me to be able to cooperate and pay a buyer's broker to bring me a buyer. Right? So it's conversations that we just need to be very clear with them. And if they don't want to pay a buyer's broker, that's fine. That is their prerogative. They can just pay you your listing side and that's it. However, do you really want to take a listing where it's going to sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there? Because nobody's coming because they're not offering compensation. Because there's still going to be agents that are gonna call, oh, you're not offering compensation, I'm not sending this to my client. There's still going to be agents that are going to do that. There's going to be listing agents that are not going to want to, even if they're getting 6%, they're not going to want to share their compensation. They're going to gear their seller to put no compensation offered. Because they know they're going to get their 6%. So they don't care if it sits there 6 months. All right. So there's going to be different scenarios. You have to decide. I mean, we are a cooperating brokerage. We always have been, and we want to still keep being a cooperating, because we know that what's the purpose of getting a house, a listing, if you can't sell it?
Yeah.
You know what happens? That sign sits in front of that house for 2 months, 3 months. You know what the neighbors are thinking? Oh my God, that agent must be horrible. They haven't even sold that house. I'm not calling that agent. Look how long that house has been up for sale already. Right? They're not looking at maybe they're not paying compensation, or maybe the price is too high, or maybe this, or maybe that. No, they're looking at you.
They're looking at the realtor,
saying, oh my God, she hasn't been able to sell the house. I guess she's not that great of a realtor. I'm not going to call her to sell my house. So you don't want a listing that's going to sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there. So you have to make a decision of, do I want to work with the seller who's not offering any compensation? Do I really want to work with the seller? I don't know. I might not want to work with that seller. Because if I'm going to take a listing for it just to sit there and sit there and sit there and make me look bad. Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, Janet.
Going back to the buyers, what would be the conversation more of, like, in the buyer's agreement, now that you have 3 apples that you want to charge as your price, and obviously I see it like also employments, like this company pays this amount and this other company pays this other amount, and I rather go take this employee or whatever because it's less money or whatever. And now it's the same thing as realtors, so there's going to be realtors that are charging 2 apples and this realtor charged 3 apples. And how would you navigate with that? Like,
With the buyer's agent? I mean, as a
yes.
buyer's agent? So
And
again, you have to determine what your worth is.
okay.
Bottom line. You
And
know, how much are, again, how much, my question to you guys is how much are you willing to accept as compensation? If
okay.
you're okay, it's a $500,000 house and you're okay getting 1%, you got $5,000, you're okay with that, then you do 1%, right? But just know that if the listing side is paying 3%, you just lost 2%. So you just left money on the table. Okay. Now,
and regarding trust with the customer, now that you're saying the 3% of the 3 apples or the 2 apples, and they're saying, well, really, I can't afford that, but you're telling them, you know, if the seller is going to be able to contribute to the compensation, would it say it there, or is it just a trust and a verbal agreement?
no, it says it on the agreement that if the seller is, or the selling side is paying compensation, that we cannot charge more than whatever we agreed with them to charge them, right?
Okay.
So if we agree to one apple and they're paying 3, Mr. Buyer, you're only paying 1, right? I'm going to try to get that 1 apple from the listing side so you don't have to pay anything. So if the
Okay.
listing is paying 3, you know that you're going to get your 1 because they're paying 3, so you're going to get your 1. So now the buyer doesn't have to pay you, right? Because you already got the 1% covered by the listing side.
Okay.
So, you know, and again, it's building, you know, this, Mr. Buyer, this is what I'm going to do for you. If you go to, I don't know if it's Florida Realtors, but I think I think I put it in our group 2 under files. It's a list of all the things that buyers agents do for their clients. It's, I think, 129 things that we do for our clients. So have that little sheet printed out in your presentation. Mr. Buyer, this is what I do for my clients, right? These are the 129 things that I will do for you when I'm representing you. Obviously, make sure that whatever that paper says, you are actually doing, right? You don't want to say that you're going to do something and you don't do it. So make sure that, you know, if there's something in there that, oh, I'm definitely not going to do that, then take it out. But if you say that you're going to do whatever that paper says, you need to do what that paper says. Okay. So that's part of your presentation, right? This is why my compensation is 3 apples, because this is all the things that I'm going to do through this transaction for you. Okay. And again, you know, it's your decision how much you want to be compensated. We're going to make recommendations. Okay. But it's up to you how much you feel that you want. If I have $1 million house, I know it's going to take me longer to sell. I'm going to have to take higher end pictures. I'm going to have to do very nice open house. I'm going to spend money. I'm not going to put 1% because I'm okay with $10,000, right? No, I'm going to charge what I know that it's going to take me to sell that house. If the house is overpriced, you know it's going to take you longer. You're going to have to do more open houses. You're going to have to do more marketing. You know, you're going to have to, you know, you still have to pay photography. You still have to do this. You still have to. So we're spending money, especially with listings, right from the beginning without even getting paid, with no guarantee of getting paid. No guarantee. That's why those cancellation fees are important, because if they decide to cancel that contract, at least you can recoup the money that you invested. But if you don't put a cancellation fee on those listing agreements, you know, you just spend, let's say, $300 or $400 on photography. You did open houses, you spent money, you went and bought, you know, these banners and all this stuff to do these open houses, and you just spend, you know, $400, $500, $600 before you even got paid, right? With no guarantee that you're ever going to recoup that money. So that's why, you know, those cancellation fees are key, because if they do decide to cancel, at least you were able to recoup your fees. Okay. But you have to determine what your worth is. That's the bottom line. You have to determine what you're willing to accept. If it's a $600,000 house and you're okay collecting $6,000, you can charge 1 apple, right? But your thing is that you want to make sure that you cover yourself, because you can always reduce your compensation. And you can increase, but then you have to do a modification, and that's going to be hard for the buyer to sign. So I would say, you know, look, Mr. Buyer, this is my normal compensation.
Definitely.
This is my normal compensation. I'm going to try my best to get, whether that's through negotiations, concessions, whatever, I'm going to try to get my best to receive my compensation from the listing side, whether that's through a brokerage agreement, whether that's through the seller paying part of my compensation, or if that's part of concessions that we're able to get credits for, you know, so that you can use those to also help pay my compensation. I'm going to try to do that for you. But I have to tell you that this is my compensation. Now, if I charge, you know, 3 apples, and I'm able to get 2 apples, and you're okay with it, you have to be okay with it, and I'm able to get 2 apples from the other side, I'm okay just accepting those 2 apples, and I won't charge you the other apple. I'm okay with that, right? But you have to be okay with that. But you don't want to shortchange yourself either, right? So you always want to put more and be able to reduce it to less if you need to, than put less, and now you have to try to get the buyer to sign a modification agreement to agree that the listing site is going to pay you 3 apples or 4 apples or a bonus or anything of that nature, right? That's going to be hard for them to sign, especially when you agree to, you know, 2 apples. And now you want to change it to 3 apples or 4 apples. That, I mean, that to me as a consumer would be almost sketchy, you know, or would be like, well, why, how come they can't just contribute that to my closing costs?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'd rather be safe than have to explain myself later on trying to do a modification of that compensation. You know, because if you're okay getting paid 3 apples, and it doesn't matter if the listing side is paying 6 apples, if you're okay with 3 apples, then you're okay with 3 apples. Right? But you need to make sure that you're okay with what your compensation is going to be, whether you get it from the buyer or you're getting it from the listing side. Okay. Any other questions? I know we've gone on almost 2 hours here. So any other questions? Well, you
Nope.
guys know that I'm always here. You know, I know that this is going to be confusing, especially for your first 2 or 3 transactions until you kind of get the hang of it. So what I'm going to recommend is, if you have a listing, make sure that you're using the new listing agreement first. Make sure you let me know, make sure that I review that listing agreement. The other thing I want to highly, highly, highly stress is that the MLS is giving very hefty fines if you violate the new rules. What are the new rules? No compensation talk on the MLS. You can't get creative and put 3 apples. We're paying 3 apples. You know, we can't get creative. We can't put on the broker remarks or anywhere on the MLS anything that is related to compensation. Nothing. They are going to be screening every single listing probably for the next year to make sure that there's nothing about compensation anywhere on the MLS. They did put something new in there that now allows, so if the seller agrees to concessions, so like say the seller says, you know, I'm willing to, you know, Teresa, I'm okay, I'm going to pay you, but I'm willing to pay, you know, 2% concessions to help with the buyer's closing cost. There's a section now that you can put that, concessions, not compensation, concessions. Okay. So there is a section now on the MLS for that. But that the seller has to agree to pay that concession. Okay. And there is a section, I think, on the listing agreement that also talks about that. So if they agree to it, they agree to it. And the buyer can use that concession for whatever they want as far as their closing costs are concerned, including your compensation. So, you know, there's at least that. But as far as you putting anything in broker remarks or in showing time, nowhere you can put compensation. Or even try to attempt to say, oh, we're showing the property only at 3 o'clock. you know, like a little signal. It's 3%, right? You cannot get creative. Nothing about compensation on the MLS, because if it even looks like more is cold, they're gonna fine you. Okay, so you can, however, put 3% on the key on your listing thing in the lockbox. You can put a little post-it note there. Hey, we're cooperating with 3%. You can put it on flyers. You can put it on social media. You can put it anywhere except the MLS. You can have a when you have an open house, or when you have a showing, you know, you're showing the properties, you can have a seller, whichever agreement you're going to have with the listing, with the seller, you know, whether they're going to cooperate, we're going to cooperate with our compensation, or they're going to cooperate with the buyer, whatever agreement they agree to in this listing agreement, you can have those compensation forms at your listing. So that, you know, if you get an agent coming in that didn't call you before to check if you're paying compensation, then at that point, you know, you can show them, hey, you know, I just wanted to let you know, this is the agreement for compensation. This is what we agree to as compensation. Okay, so you can do all that. The only place you cannot put it is anywhere on the MLS, or anything that has a feed that comes from the MLS. Okay, so like for instance, Zillow, you can't put it in the remarks in Zillow, because Zillow does have its own IDX, or it has the IDX that it comes from our MLS. So you have to make sure that it's either a conversation, you can text it, you can email it, you can do whatever. It just cannot be on the MLS, anywhere on the MLS. Okay. So you can get creative. You can put it on your signs, flyers at the open house. You can put compensation anywhere if you're offering compensation, or the listing site is offering compensation, but you cannot put it on the MLS. Okay. The fines are very, very steep, and they're not playing. They're not like right now. Sometimes you make a little boo-boo and they say, yo, you have a $500 fine because you made this boo-boo. And usually you can just call them and say, I'm so sorry, I missed it. And they're very lenient about that type of thing. But with this, they are not being lenient. They're being like, nope, you messed up. This is a $500 fine. Second time you mess up, it's a $5,000 fine. Third time you mess up, $15,000 fine. And now I'm just going to remove you from the MLS altogether. Okay. So very hefty fines, and they're not going to the broker, they're going to the agent. So just keep that in mind. So from now on, at least for the next couple months, if you have any listings, save them as incomplete, and then, you know, let me know that they're ready to be reviewed so I can review them. The broker might have something in there where you can't submit it until we review it first. I don't want to have to do that, and hopefully we don't have to do that, because you guys are all responsible, but I want to make sure that we review those inputs into the MLS for the next couple of months, to make sure that you guys understand and there's nothing in there that is going to get you in trouble. Okay.
Okay.
All right, guys. That's it. Thank you so much. I know it's long. I apologize for that, but I know that the questions are there and the questions needed to be answered. And again, I'm still here. If you need me, you can call me, you know, you can text me, whatever. Also, guys, if you text me and I don't respond right away, please send me a nudge, because sometimes I get so many texts, you know, I'm like in so many groups sometimes, and it's like hard to keep track. So if you text me and I don't get back to you right away, it's either I'm sick, I'm in bed, or I didn't have time at that moment and then I forgot to respond. But, you know, just keep that in mind. If I don't respond to you in a timely manner, just send me another text message or call me, whatever you need to do, so that I can get your questions answered. Okay. I'm human. Sometimes I forget stuff. I do forget stuff. But, you know, I want to make sure that you guys don't ever feel like you're not being supported. Okay. All right, guys.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Have a great one.
Thank
Love
you
you
so
guys.
much. You're the best.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, my
Bye.
love. Bye.
Okay, good.